The thunder of hooves shook the ground beneath Emma Wellington's feet as she stood frozen in terror, watching 2,000 head of cattle bearing down on her like an avalanche of flesh and horns. The afternoon sun beat mercilessly on the dusty plains outside Republic, Kansas in the summer of 1878, and Emma had ventured too far from the wagon train during their rest stop. She had been chasing her bonnet when the wind snatched it from her head, laughing at her own foolishness as she ran through the tall grass. Then the earth began to tremble, and she turned to see death stampeding toward her in the form of longhorns spooked by something she could not see. Her legs refused to move. Her throat closed around a scream that would not come. The cattle were perhaps 30 yards away now, close enough that she could see the wild rolling of their eyes, the foam at their mouths, the deadly points of their horns catching the sunlight. This was how she would die at 20 years old, trampled into the Kansas soil before she ever reached California where her aunt waited. Then something slammed into her from the side, knocking the breath from her lungs. Strong arms wrapped around her waist, and she was lifted clean off her feet, pressed against a hard chest that smelled of leather and sweat and dust. The world blurred as a horse surged beneath them, powerful muscles bunching and releasing as it raced away from the stampede at an angle she would not have thought possible. Emma clung to the man who held her, her fingers digging into his shirt as the thundering herd passed so close behind them that dust choked the air and made her eyes water. She buried her face against his chest and held on with every ounce of strength she possessed while the horse beneath them galloped for their lives. It felt like an eternity before the thunder began to fade. The horse slowed gradually from a gallop to a canter, then to a walk. Emma's rescuer held her steady with one arm while his other hand controlled the reins, keeping them upright as his horse danced nervously, still spooked by the stampede. "Easy, Dusty," the man said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through his chest against Emma's cheek. "Easy now. We're all right." Emma could not let go. Her hands remained fisted in his shirt, her body trembling with reaction as the reality of how close she had come to death washed over her in waves. She felt the man shift in the saddle, felt one hand come up to rest gently on her back. "You're safe now," he said, and something in his voice made fresh tears spring to her eyes. "I've got you." She lifted her head slowly to look at him and found herself staring into the kindest brown eyes she had ever seen. They were set in a face weathered by sun and wind, with strong features that spoke of determination and character. He was perhaps 23 or 24, with dark hair visible beneath his wide-brimmed hat, and a square jaw shadowed with several days of stubble. There was dust on his face and concern in his expression as he looked down at her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Emma shook her head, not trusting her voice. She should let go of him now. It was improper to be pressed so intimately against a stranger, to be seated sideways across his lap on his horse with her arms around him, but she could not make herself release her grip. "Thank you," she finally managed, the words coming out as barely more than a whisper. "You saved my life." "Anyone would have done the same," he said, but the gentleness in his eyes told her he understood what she had faced. "What were you doing out here alone?" "I was with the wagon train," Emma said, becoming aware that she had lost her bonnet entirely now, and that her carefully pinned hair was coming loose. "We stopped to rest and water the animals. I was chasing my bonnet when the wind took it, and then—" She trailed off, the memory of those charging cattle making her shudder. The cowboy's arm tightened around her slightly, a gesture of comfort that made something warm unfurl in Emma's chest, despite the terror that still thrummed through her veins. She looked up at him again and felt a strange certainty settle over her, a feeling she could not name, but that seemed to root itself deep in her bones. "I'm yours now," she whispered before she could stop herself. His eyes widened slightly. "Madam." Emma felt heat rush to her cheeks, but she did not look away. "You saved my life. According to the stories I have read, that makes me yours, indebted to you." A slow smile transformed his face, softening the hard edges and making him almost handsome. "I don't think that is exactly how debt works, madam, and those are just stories." "Emma," she said. "My name is Emma Wellington." "Marcus Reid," he replied, then seemed to remember himself and began to pull back slightly. "We should get you back to your wagon train. They will be worried." But Emma did not loosen her grip. She knew she should feel embarrassed by her behavior, by the impropriety of clinging to a strange man. Her mother would have been scandalized. But her mother was 5 years in the grave, and Emma had just looked death in the face, and something about this moment felt precious in a way she could not articulate. "In a moment," she said softly. "Please, I just need another moment." Marcus looked down at her, and something shifted in his expression. Understanding, perhaps, or maybe recognition of something deeper. He nodded slowly. "Take all the time you need." They sat like that on his horse while the dust settled around them, and the distant thunder of the stampede faded into the vast Kansas prairie. Emma could hear Marcus's heart beating steady and strong beneath her ear, could feel the rise and fall of his breathing. The initial shock was beginning to wear off, replaced by a strange sense of peace that made no logical sense given what had just happened. "Where were you heading?" Marcus asked after a while, his voice quiet so as not to break the moment too abruptly. "California," Emma said. "My father and I joined a wagon train in Independence, Missouri 6 weeks ago. We are going to stay with my aunt in Sacramento. She runs a boarding house there and needs help since her husband passed." "Long journey," Marcus observed. "You are brave to undertake it." Emma almost laughed at that. "I was not brave at all just now. I froze, if you had not come along." "But I did come along," Marcus interrupted gently. "And you are safe. That is what matters." "What were you doing out here?" Emma asked, finally beginning to relax slightly in his arms. "Were those your cattle?" "No, madam." "Emma," he corrected himself when she raised an eyebrow at him. "I work for the Double Bar Ranch about 10 miles east of here. We were driving a herd up from Texas when something spooked them. A rattlesnake, maybe, or thunder in the distance. It does not take much to set off a stampede once the cattle are tired and nervous." "Will they be all right? The cattle, I mean." Marcus nodded. "The other hands will round them up. It will take most of the day, but they know what they are doing." "I saw you standing there and knew I had to get you out of the way first." "You could have been killed," Emma said, the realization hitting her suddenly. "You risked your life for a stranger. Like I said, anyone would have done the same." But the way he said it, and the way he was looking at her, suggested that maybe it had not been such a simple decision. Maybe he had seen something in that frozen moment that made him spur his horse harder than was wise, that made him lean down and scoop her up with perfect timing that left no room for error. Emma felt that certainty again, that strange knowing that settled in her chest like a bird coming home to roost. She had read stories about love at first sight, had dismissed them as romantic fancy with no basis in reality. But this feeling, this connection she felt to the man who held her, defied her rational understanding. "I should really get you back," Marcus said, though he made no move to urge his horse forward. "Your father will be frantic." The mention of her father made Emma's heart sink. "He is going to be very angry that I wandered off." "He will just be relieved you are safe," Marcus assured her. "Any father would be." Emma finally loosened her grip on his shirt, smoothing the wrinkles she had created in the fabric. "I have ruined your shirt." "It has survived worse," Marcus said with a smile. Are you ready? No, Emma wanted to say. She was not ready to return to the wagon train, to face her father's worry and anger, to continue on toward California and a life she had not chosen for herself. She was not ready to let go of this man who had appeared like something out of a dream and made her feel safer than she had felt since her mother died. But she nodded anyway. Yes, thank you again, Marcus. Just doing what any decent man would do, he said, but his eyes lingered on her face in a way that made her breath catch. Marcus adjusted his hold on her, making sure she was secure, then clicked his tongue and urged Dusty into a walk. The horse moved smoothly beneath them, well-trained and responsive to the lightest command. Emma allowed herself to relax against Marcus's chest as they rode, telling herself it was simply for safety and balance, ignoring the way her heart seemed to skip every time he shifted and his arm tightened around her. The wagon train came into view about 15 minutes later. Emma could see people running back and forth, and her heart sank as she recognized her father's tall figure standing on top of one of the wagons, shading his eyes as he scanned the horizon. He spotted them almost immediately and began waving his arms, shouting something Emma could not yet make out. "That is your father?" Marcus asked. "Yes, Edward Wellington. He is a lawyer, or was. He sold his practice in Philadelphia to make this journey." "Why?" The question was simple but not prying. "He said he wanted a fresh start after my mother died. Said California represented opportunity and a new life." Emma paused. "I think he just wanted to get away from the memories." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Grief can make people do strange things. There was something in his voice that made Emma look up at him. "You sound as though you speak from experience." "Everyone has lost someone," Marcus said, which was not really an answer but felt true enough that Emma did not press. As they drew closer to the wagon train, Emma could make out her father's expression. He looked frantic with worry, his face pale beneath his hat. When he saw that she was safe, relief flooded his features, quickly followed by what Emma recognized as anger born of fear. "Emma," he shouted as Marcus brought Dusty to a stop near the wagons. "Where in God's name have you been?" "Do you have any idea how worried I have been?" "I am sorry, Papa," Emma said, finally releasing her hold on Marcus's shirt so she could sit up straighter. "My bonnet blew away and I chased it. I did not realize I had gone so far." "There was a stampede," her father said, his voice shaking slightly. "We heard it but could not see which direction. I thought—" He broke off, seeming to notice for the first time that Emma was seated on a horse with a strange man. His eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" Marcus helped Emma slide down from the horse before dismounting himself. He removed his hat respectfully. "Marcus Reed, sir. I work for the Double Bar Ranch. I happened upon your daughter when the stampede came through. She was in the path of the herd." Edward Wellington's face went even paler. "In the path?" He looked at Emma with dawning horror. "You could have been killed." "I would have been," Emma said quietly, "if not for Marcus. He rode straight into danger to pull me clear." Her father turned his attention back to Marcus, and Emma watched as the anger drained away, replaced by profound gratitude. Edward stepped forward and grasped Marcus's hand, shaking it firmly. "Then I owe you a debt I can never repay. You saved my daughter's life." "I am just glad I was in the right place," Marcus said, his humility seeming genuine rather than false modesty. "You must let me reward you," Edward said. "I do not have much, but whatever I can offer—" "That is not necessary, sir," Marcus interrupted gently. "I did not do it for a reward." Emma watched the exchange, her heart swelling with affection for this man who had appeared in her life so unexpectedly. She could see the wagon master approaching, a grizzled older man named Silas Turner who had been leading wagon trains for 30 years. "Everything all right here?" Silas asked, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. Edward quickly explained what had happened, and Silas listened with the expression of a man who had seen too much to be easily shocked. When the story was finished, he turned to Marcus and gave him a respectful nod. "That was good riding," he said simply. "The young lady is lucky you were nearby." "Yes," Edward said, his hand still on Marcus's shoulder. "Very lucky indeed." He paused, looking between Emma and Marcus with an expression she could not quite read. "Mr. Reed, we are stopped here for the rest of the day to rest the animals and make repairs to one of the wagons. Would you do us the honor of joining us for supper this evening? It is the least we can do to thank you." Emma's heart leaped at the invitation, and she found herself holding her breath as she waited for Marcus's response. She saw him hesitate, glance toward the direction the stampede had gone, then look back at her. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. "I should check on the herd," Marcus said slowly, "but if you do not mind me returning later, I would be honored to join you." "Excellent," Edward said, looking pleased. "We will expect you around sunset." Marcus replaced his hat and nodded to Emma. "Until this evening, then." "Until this evening," Emma repeated, aware that her father and Silas were watching her with interest. She stood and watched as Marcus mounted Dusty and rode off toward where the stampede had gone, his figure growing smaller against the vast Kansas prairie. She felt a strange ache in her chest, as though part of her was riding away with him, tethered by an invisible thread that stretched but did not break. "Emma," her father said gently, and she turned to find him looking at her with concern. "Are you certain you are all right? You are not injured?" "I am fine, Papa," she assured him. "Just shaken." "Come," he said, putting an arm around her shoulders and guiding her toward their wagon. "Let us get you cleaned up and rested. You have had quite an ordeal." Emma allowed herself to be led away, but she could not help glancing back over her shoulder one more time. Marcus was almost out of sight now, just a small figure on the horizon. She touched her chest, pressing her hand over her heart where that certainty still resided. The afternoon passed slowly. Emma washed the dust from her face and hands, changed into a fresh dress, and attempted to repair her hair into something presentable. Her fingers trembled slightly as she worked, residual shock from the near-death experience finally catching up with her now that she was alone. She kept seeing the cattle bearing down on her, kept feeling that moment of absolute terror when she knew she could not escape. And then Marcus's arms around her, strong and sure, pulling her to safety. The memory made her skin warm in a way that had nothing to do with the Kansas heat. "You are thinking about him," said a voice from outside the wagon, and Emma looked up to see Margaret Flynn, a young woman traveling with her family in the wagon behind Emma's. Margaret was 19, cheerful and practical, and had become Emma's closest friend on the journey. "May I come in?" Margaret asked, already climbing into the wagon without waiting for an answer. She settled herself on the trunk across from where Emma sat and fixed her with a knowing look. "The whole camp is talking about your rescue. They say he rode straight into the stampede to save you. They say he swept you up like you weighed nothing and rode to safety with you in his arms." "That is essentially what happened," Emma admitted, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "And they say he is extremely handsome," Margaret continued, her eyes dancing with amusement. "Is that true as well?" Emma tried to maintain her composure but could not help the smile that tugged at her lips. "He is pleasant-looking." "Pleasant-looking," Margaret repeated with a laugh. "Emma Wellington, you are blushing like a schoolgirl. He must be more than pleasant-looking." "Fine," Emma conceded. "He is handsome, and kind, and brave. He risked his life for a complete stranger." "How romantic," Margaret sighed. "Like something out of a novel, the heroic cowboy saving the damsel in distress. Is he joining us for supper?" My father invited him, Emma said, trying to sound casual about it and failing entirely. He said he would return around sunset. Then we must make sure you look absolutely beautiful, Margaret declared, scooting closer. Let me help with your hair. That style is too severe. We want something softer, more becoming. Emma wanted to protest that it did not matter how she looked, that Marcus had already seen her at her absolute worst, covered in dust with her hair wild and tears on her face. But she found she did want to look nice for him, wanted to see that look in his eyes again, the one that had made her feel precious and protected. So she sat still and let Margaret work, rebraiding and repinning her honey-colored hair into a style that framed her face more gently. Margaret declared the high-necked traveling dress Emma had put on too plain and helped her change into a blue cotton dress that brought out the color of her eyes and fit more flatteringly across her figure. "There," Margaret said with satisfaction, stepping back to admire her work. "You look lovely. He will not be able to take his eyes off you." "That is not the goal," Emma said, but she could not help looking at herself in the small hand mirror Margaret held up. She did look better, she had to admit. The fear and shock had faded from her eyes, replaced by something brighter. Anticipation, perhaps. Hope. "Of course it is the goal," Margaret said matter-of-factly. "Emma, when was the last time you looked at a man the way you looked at that cowboy when he rode away?" "I have never looked at any man that way," Emma admitted quietly. "Exactly my point," Margaret said, her expression softening. "I know your father wants you to help your aunt in California, and I know you are being dutiful about it. But Emma, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to have someone look at you the way I suspect that Cowboy looks at you." "We just met," Emma protested. "He is probably just being kind. He saved my life and now he is being polite by accepting my father's dinner invitation." "If you truly believe that, you are not as intelligent as I thought you were," Margaret said with a grin. "I saw the way he helped you down from his horse. I saw the way he looked at you before he rode away. That was not just politeness, Emma, that was interest." Emma's heart fluttered at the thought. Could Marcus truly be interested in her? And if he was, what did that mean? She was leaving for California, continuing west with the wagon train that would take months to reach its destination. Marcus worked for a ranch here in Kansas. There was no future in whatever this attraction was between them, but logic seemed to have little place in her heart at the moment. The thought of seeing Marcus again in just a few hours made her feel light and nervous and excited all at once, emotions she had never experienced with such intensity. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Emma helped prepare the evening meal, working alongside Margaret and some of the other women to create a feast that would properly honor Marcus. They roasted prairie chicken and made biscuits and gravy, even brought out precious preserves for a treat. Edward contributed a bottle of wine he had been saving for a special occasion, declaring that Emma's survival certainly qualified. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Emma found herself watching the eastern approach, looking for a rider. Her father noticed and came to stand beside her, following her gaze. "You like him," Edward said. It was not a question. Emma considered denying it but knew her father would see through the lie. "I hardly know him, Papa." "Sometimes that does not matter," Edward said quietly. "I knew I would marry your mother within an hour of meeting her." She laughed at something her sister said, and the sound of it made my heart feel too large for my chest. I knew in that moment that I wanted to hear that laugh for the rest of my life. Emma looked at her father in surprise. He rarely spoke of her mother, the pain of losing her still too fresh even 5 years later. "You never told me that story." "I suppose I have been too busy running from memories to share them," Edward admitted. "But seeing you today, Seeing how close I came to losing you too, it made me realize I have been selfish. I uprooted your life to ease my own grief without truly considering what you wanted. Papa, let me finish, Edward said gently. I want you to know that if you have feelings for this young man, I will not stand in your way. I know we are heading to California, but that does not mean you are bound to continue on if you find a reason to stay. Emma's throat tightened with emotion. I do not want to abandon you. You would not be abandoning me, Edward assured her. You would be choosing your own happiness. That is what I want for you, Emma, more than anything else. He paused, smiling slightly. Though I confess I am getting ahead of myself. The poor man has not even arrived for supper yet, and I am already giving away my daughter. Emma laughed, the sound a bit watery. Thank you, Papa. There is nothing to thank me for, Edward said, then nodded toward the horizon. Unless I am mistaken, your cowboy is here. Emma turned and felt her heart leap into her throat. Marcus was riding toward them on Dusty, silhouetted against the sunset. He had cleaned up since earlier, she could see as he drew closer. His face was washed clean of dust, and he wore a fresh shirt and vest. His dark hair was damp, suggesting he had found a creek somewhere to bathe in. He looked handsome and solid and real, and Emma felt that certainty bloom in her chest again, stronger than before. Marcus dismounted before reaching the camp, leading Dusty the rest of the way on foot. Several of the men from the wagon train approached to greet him, shaking his hand and clapping him on the shoulder, thanking him for saving Emma. He accepted their gratitude with the same humble grace he had shown earlier, looking a bit uncomfortable with all the attention. Then his eyes found Emma, and everything else seemed to fade away. He smiled at her, slow and genuine, and Emma felt her breath catch. Margaret had been right. That was not just politeness in his gaze. That was definitely interest, warm and intent and focused entirely on her. Evening, Marcus said, approaching her and her father. He nodded respectfully to Edward. Thank you again for the invitation, sir. Thank you for coming, Edward replied. And please call me Edward. I think you have earned the right to dispense with formalities after saving my daughter's life. Then you should call me Marcus, he said, then turned to Emma. You look lovely. Are you feeling better? Much better, Emma said, wondering if he could hear how fast her heart was beating. Thank you for returning. I said I would, Marcus replied simply, as though keeping his word was the most natural thing in the world. Knowing what she did of him already, Emma suspected it probably was. Silas Turner called everyone to gather for the meal, and the members of the wagon train settled around the fire with plates piled high with food. Marcus was given a place of honor between Emma and her father, and Emma tried not to be too obvious about how aware she was of his presence beside her. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, could catch the clean scent of soap and leather every time he moved. Tell us about yourself, Marcus, Edward said as they ate. Have you been working for the Double Bar long? About 3 years now, Marcus said. Before that, I worked on a ranch down in Texas near Fort Worth. But I wanted to see more of the country, so I drifted north and ended up in Kansas. You have family? Margaret's mother asked from across the fire. Emma saw something flicker across Marcus's face, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. No, madam. My parents died when I was young. A fever took them both within a week of each other. I was 14. Ended up working ranches after that, learning the trade. I am sorry, Emma said softly, and Marcus turned to look at her. It was a long time ago, he said. You learned to make your own family. The men I work with at the Double Bar, they are good people. My foreman, Jake Henderson, he has been teaching me the business side of ranching. Says I have a head for it. You want to own your own ranch someday? Edward asked with interest. Marcus nodded slowly. That is the dream. Save up enough money to buy some land, start small and build it up. There is good grazing land in these parts, plenty of water. A man could make a good life here if he worked hard enough. Emma listened to him talk, hearing the quiet determination in his voice. He was not a man who expected things to be handed to him. He was someone who understood that dreams required work and patience. She found herself imagining what it would be like to help build that dream, to create something lasting together. "What about you, Emma?" Marcus asked, turning the conversation to her. "What are your plans once you reach California?" Emma hesitated, suddenly feeling uncertain about the path she had been so resigned to before. "My aunt runs a boarding house in Sacramento. I am meant to help her manage it. She has been alone since her husband died, and it is too much work for one woman." "Is that what you want to do?" Marcus asked, and there was something in his eyes that suggested he already knew the answer. "It is what needs to be done," Emma said carefully, aware that her father was listening. "That is not what I asked," Marcus said gently. Emma looked down at her plate, searching for the right words. "I suppose I have not thought much about what I want. After my mother died, it seemed easier to just do what was needed to be useful. I never considered that I had a choice." "Everyone has choices," Marcus said. "Some are just harder than others." The conversation flowed around them as the evening deepened. Other members of the wagon train sharing stories and asking Marcus about life as a cowboy. He answered their questions with good humor, painting a picture of the work that was both honest about its difficulty and clear about its rewards. Emma found herself watching him as he talked, noticing small things. The way he gestured with his hands when he was explaining something. The smile lines around his eyes that suggested he laughed often. The respectful way he addressed the women, and the easy camaraderie he fell into with the men. He was genuine in a way that seemed rare, with no pretense or false bravado. When the meal was finished and people began to drift away to their own wagons, Marcus stood and offered to help clean up. Emma quickly volunteered to help as well, ignoring Margaret's knowing smirk. They worked together to gather plates and scrub them with sand and water, falling into an easy rhythm that felt natural despite having just met. "I am glad you came back," Emma said as they worked. "I am glad you invited me," Marcus replied. "Your father seems like a good man. And the people on this train, they care about each other. That is not always the case." "Have you been on many cattle drives?" Emma asked, wanting to know everything about him. "A fair few," Marcus said. "It is hard work but honest. You spend weeks under the stars, dealing with whatever nature throws at you. Stampedes, river crossings, lightning storms, heat, cold. But there is something about it that gets in your blood. The freedom of it, I suppose. The feeling that you are part of something bigger than yourself." "I think I understand that," Emma said. "This journey west, it has been difficult. But there are moments, usually in the evening when the sky is full of stars, when I feel like I am exactly where I need to be. Like I am moving toward something important, even if I do not know what it is yet." Marcus stopped scrubbing and looked at her, his expression intense. "Maybe you have already found it." Emma's breath caught. They were standing close together, alone in the gathering darkness away from the main camp. She could see the way the firelight cast shadows across Marcus's face, making him look both rugged and gentle at the same time. "Marcus," she said softly, not sure what she wanted to say but needing to fill the charged silence between them. "I know this is fast," Marcus said, his voice low and earnest. "I know I have no right to say this when we just met today. But Emma, when I saw you standing in front of that stampede, something in me knew I had to save you. Not just because it was the right thing to do, but because losing you before I even knew you felt impossible to accept." "I felt it too," Emma whispered. "When you pulled me onto your horse and I was in your arms, I felt safer than I have felt in years. And I knew, somehow, that you were important. That meeting you mattered. Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, he cupped her face gently in his calloused hand. I want to know you, Emma Wellington. I want to spend time with you and learn what makes you laugh, what you dream about, what you hope for. But you are leaving and I am here, and I do not know how to make this work. Emma leaned into his touch, closing her eyes briefly. I do not know either. But my father said something earlier that surprised me. He said he would not stand in my way if I had feelings for you, that I should choose my own happiness. And what would make you happy? Marcus asked. Emma opened her eyes and looked at him, this man who had crashed into her life with such dramatic timing. She thought about the boarding house in Sacramento, about the life of duty and usefulness that awaited her there. Then she thought about Kansas, about wide prairies and endless sky, about a man who wanted to build a ranch and had kind eyes and strong hands and a dream he was willing to work for. You, she said simply. I think you would make me happy. Marcus smiled, and it transformed his whole face. You have no idea how glad I am to hear you say that. But it has only been one day, Emma felt compelled to point out. We do not really know each other. This could just be excitement from the rescue, emotions running high. What if we spend time together and discover we do not suit? Then at least we will know, Marcus said. But Emma, I do not think that is what is going to happen. Do you? Emma searched her heart and found no doubt there, only that steady certainty that had taken root the moment Marcus pulled her into his arms. No, she admitted. I do not think so either. The wagon train is staying another day to make repairs, Marcus said. Silas told me earlier I could come back tomorrow if you would like. We could spend some time together, talk more, give this thing between us a chance to develop. I would like that very much, Emma said. They stood there in the darkness, Marcus's hand still cupping her face, the air between them charged with possibility. Emma thought he might kiss her, and part of her desperately wanted him to. But instead, he lowered his hand and stepped back slightly, respecting the propriety of the situation even though they both felt the pull. I should let you get some rest, Marcus said. It has been a long day for you. Will you really come back tomorrow? Emma asked, needing the reassurance. Wild horses could not keep me away, Marcus promised. I will be here at first light. Emma smiled. First light might be excessive. Perhaps mid-morning would be better. Marcus laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Mid-morning it is. He walked her back to her wagon, where Edward was waiting with a knowing expression. Marcus bid them both good night, retrieved Dusty and mounted up. He looked down at Emma one more time, tipped his hat to her, then rode off into the darkness. Emma stood watching until she could no longer see him, then turned to find her father smiling at her. Well, Edward said, that is certainly an interesting development. Papa, Emma started, but Edward held up a hand. I meant what I said earlier. I will not stand in your way. If this young man makes you happy, if you want to see where this leads, then I support you completely. What about Aunt Catherine? She is expecting us. I will write to her and explain, Edward said. Your aunt will understand. She married for love herself against her parents' wishes. She would never want you to give up a chance at happiness for duty. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Are you certain? Very certain, Edward said firmly. Now get some sleep. Something tells me tomorrow is going to be an important day. Emma climbed into the wagon and changed into her nightdress, but sleep eluded her for hours. She lay on her bedroll staring up at the canvas cover of the wagon, reliving every moment of the day. The terror of the stampede, the security of Marcus's arms, the way he had looked at her by the firelight. The promise in his voice when he said he would return. She thought about the life she had been heading toward in California and compared it to the possibility opening up before her here in Kansas. A life of duty versus a life of love. Practical service versus passionate purpose. There was no contest, really. Her heart had already made the choice, even if her mind was still catching up. When she finally slept, Emma dreamed of wide prairies and a ranch house on a hill, of strong arms around her and a future bright with promise. The next morning dawned clear and beautiful, the sky a perfect blue unmarred by clouds. Emma woke early despite her late night, too excited to sleep. She dressed carefully in a simple green dress that was practical enough for a day outdoors but pretty enough to be flattering. Margaret appeared as she was finishing her hair, eyes bright with curiosity. "So," Margaret demanded, "what happened after the rest of us went to bed? I saw you two walk off together." Emma felt herself blush. "We just talked. He is coming back this morning." "I knew it," Margaret said triumphantly. "Emma Wellington, you are falling in love. Admit it." "It is too soon to call it love," Emma protested, but even as she said it, she wondered if that was true. What else could explain the depth of feeling she had for someone she had known less than a day? "Call it what you want," Margaret said, "but I see it in your eyes. You are glowing." Marcus arrived just as he had promised, riding into camp as the morning sun climbed higher. Emma was helping to prepare breakfast, but she looked up at the sound of hoofbeats and felt her heart soar when she saw him. He was dressed in clean work clothes, his hat tipped back on his head, and he was smiling as he dismounted. "Morning," he said, approaching Emma. "I hope I am not too early." "You are right on time," Emma assured him. "Have you eaten?" "Not yet, but I do not want to impose." "It is not an imposition," Edward said, appearing from their wagon. "We would be pleased to have you join us." They ate breakfast together, the conversation flowing easily. Marcus told stories about life on the ranch that made Emma laugh, particularly one involving a bull named Thunder, who had a particular hatred for anyone wearing a red shirt. In return, Emma told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her mother's garden and her father's law practice, and the life that seemed so distant now. After breakfast, Marcus suggested they take a walk. Edward agreed readily, and Emma found herself strolling alongside Marcus through the tall prairie grass, Dusty following behind them at a leisurely pace. "Tell me about this ranch you want to own," Emma said as they walked. "What does it look like in your mind?" Marcus's face lit up at the question. "I have been scouting land whenever I get the chance. There is a piece of property about 20 miles from here, not too far from Republic. It has a creek running through it, good grass, some trees for shade and windbreaks. You can see for miles in every direction. I picture a house there, nothing fancy at first, just sturdy and well built. A barn for the horses, corrals for cattle, maybe a vegetable garden." He paused, glancing at Emma. "Room to grow." "It sounds beautiful," Emma said, and she could picture it too. Could imagine a life built slowly and carefully, with hard work and love and determination. "It is not the life you were planning," Marcus pointed out. "Ranch life is not easy, Emma. The work is constant, the weather can be brutal. There is drought and prairie fires and 100 other challenges." "I was not planning any life for myself," Emma said honestly. "I was just going where I was told, doing what was needed. But Marcus, when you describe your dream, I can see myself there. I can imagine helping you build it. And that is the first time since my mother died that I have been able to imagine a future that excited me." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. "You barely know me. I have no right to ask you to change your plans, to give up what you were heading toward." "I was not heading toward anything," Emma said. "I was just moving. There is a difference. Your father has been kind, but I am just a cowboy with some savings and a dream. I cannot offer you the comforts you are used to, not at first anyway. You know what I was used to after my mother died?" Emma asked quietly. "A house full of grief and silence. My father drowning in his work, unable to even look at me sometimes because I reminded him too much of what he had lost. I know you think I come from privilege, and maybe I did once. But I have been taking care of myself and my father for 5 years now. I know how to work hard, Marcus. I am not afraid of it. Marcus reached out and took her hands in his. I want to court you properly, Emma. I want to give you time to be certain about this about us. But I also want to be honest with you about what I am feeling. Please be honest, Emma said. I want that too. I am falling for you, Marcus said simply. Fast and hard and in a way that probably is not sensible. But when I am with you, I feel like I have found something I did not even know I was looking for. You make me want to build that ranch faster, to create a life worthy of asking you to share. You make me want to be better than I am. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were good tears. Happy tears. I am falling for you too, and I think maybe I have been waiting for you without knowing it. When I said yesterday that I was yours, I was not talking about debt. Some part of me recognized you, Marcus, recognized us. Marcus pulled her closer, and this time when he cupped her face in his hands, he did not pull away. He lowered his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to stop him, but Emma rose on her toes to meet him halfway. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and Emma felt the rightness of it down to her bones. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing a bit harder, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast, I know it is crazy. But Emma, marry me. Stay here in Kansas and build a life with me. We will do it together one day at a time, and I promise I will spend every single one of those days making sure you never regret choosing me." Emma's heart felt too full for her chest. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." Marcus pulled her into his arms and held her tight, and Emma wrapped her arms around him and held on just as fiercely. She could feel him trembling slightly, could hear the rapid beat of his heart, and knew her own was racing just as fast. This was madness. This was recklessness. This was absolutely the right decision. "Your father is going to think I have lost my mind," Marcus said, laughing a little. "Actually, I think he will be pleased," Emma said. "He told me last night that he saw the way you looked at me. I think he has been hoping for something like this." "Then let us go tell him," Marcus said. "The sooner we make this official, the sooner we can start planning our future." They walked back to camp hand in hand, both grinning like fools. Dusty followed behind them, occasionally nudging Marcus's shoulder as if congratulating him. When they reached the wagons, Edward took one look at their joined hands and radiant faces and started laughing. "That was fast," he said, but he was smiling. "Sir, I would like to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage," Marcus said formally, though he was still holding Emma's hand as he said it. Edward pretended to consider, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "Well, let me think about it. You did save her life. And you seem to make her happier than I have seen her in years. And you have an honest face and a good plan for your future." He paused. "I suppose I can give my blessing." "Really?" Emma asked, tears threatening again. Just like that," Edward confirmed. "Emma, I told you I wanted you to be happy. Anyone can see that this young man makes you happy. Why would I stand in the way of that?" He turned to Marcus. "But I am trusting you with the most precious thing in my life. You take care of her, understand?" "I will," Marcus promised. "With everything I have." News of the engagement spread through the wagon train like wildfire. Margaret hugged Emma so tightly she could barely breathe, crying happy tears and declaring it the most romantic thing she had ever witnessed. The other women gathered around to congratulate them, already planning a wedding. Silas Turner offered to perform the ceremony, having the authority as wagon master to do so. "Might as well do it before we move on," Silas said practically. No point in prolonging things when two people have made up their minds. Tomorrow, Marcus suggested, looking at Emma. Is that too soon? Tomorrow is perfect, Emma said. She had already waited 20 years to feel this way. She did not want to wait a moment longer than necessary. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. The women helped Emma prepare, letting out the waist of a white dress that had belonged to one of the travelers and adding lace from Emma's own clothing to make it special. Someone produced wildflowers from the prairie, creating a simple but beautiful bouquet. Marcus rode back to the Double Bar Ranch to inform his foreman and ask for time off, returning with Jake Henderson in tow. Jake was a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "So you are the woman who caught our Marcus," Jake said, looking Emma over approvingly. "He has been mooning around since he got back yesterday, unable to talk about anything but a beautiful woman he pulled from a stampede. Good to see he was not exaggerating." Emma blushed but smiled. "Thank you for coming. Marcus speaks highly of you." "He is like a son to me," Jake said gruffly. "I am glad to see him happy, and I am glad he is staying in Kansas. Been worried he might get restless and move on, but I think you have given him a reason to put down roots." That evening, Emma sat with her father by the fire, just the two of them. The wedding was planned for the next morning, and the reality of what she was doing was beginning to sink in. She was marrying a man she had known for barely 2 days. She was giving up her plans for California. She was choosing a life that would be hard and uncertain but full of possibility. "Are you having second thoughts?" Edward asked gently. Emma shook her head. "No, is that strange?" "Not at all," Edward said. "When you know, you know. Your mother and I were engaged within a week of meeting. Her parents thought we were insane, but we had 52 years together, and I would not trade a single one of them, even knowing how it would end." His voice roughened with emotion. "I am going to miss you, Emma, but I am so very happy for you." "I am going to miss you too, Papa," Emma said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Are you certain you want to continue to California alone?" "I am certain," Edward said. "Your aunt does need help, and I think the journey will be good for me. Give me time to think about what I want to do next. And it is not forever. I will visit and you can visit. California is not that far." "It is very far," Emma said with a shaky laugh. "Then we will write letters," Edward said firmly. "And I will be back for my grandchildren. That is not negotiable." Emma smiled through her tears. "You are assuming rather a lot." "I saw the way you two look at each other," Edward said. "I will be a grandfather within 2 years. Mark my words." The wedding took place the next morning as the sun rose over the Kansas prairie. It was simple and beautiful and perfect. Emma wore the white dress with wildflowers in her hair, and Marcus wore his best clothes with his hat in his hands, looking at her like she was the most precious thing he had ever seen. Silas Turner read a simple ceremony, and when it came time for vows, Marcus took Emma's hands and spoke from his heart. "Emma, I promise to love you and protect you for all the days of my life. I promise to work hard to build us a good life and to always make you laugh. I promise that you will never regret taking a chance on a cowboy who was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time." Emma squeezed his hands, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Marcus, I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to help you build your dreams and to never stop choosing you. I promise that every single day, I will be grateful that you were brave enough to ride into danger to save me, because it brought you into my life." Silas pronounced them married, and Marcus kissed his bride while the members of the wagon train cheered. It felt like the beginning of everything. The wagon train left 2 days later, continuing its journey west. Emma stood with Marcus and watched them go, waving until they disappeared over the horizon. Her father was with them, and the parting had been bittersweet. But Edward had hugged her tight and whispered that he was proud of her, and that was enough. Marcus had arranged for them to stay temporarily at the ranch while they made plans. He had a small room in the bunkhouse, but Jake Henderson insisted they take his larger room in the main ranch house while they figured out their next steps. "Newlyweds need privacy," Jake said firmly, brooking no argument. The Double Bar Ranch was everything Marcus had described and more. It sprawled across thousands of acres of prime Kansas grassland, with several thousand head of cattle and a dozen hands to manage them. The owner, a man named Robert Barrett, was in his 70s and spent most of his time in town these days, leaving the running of the ranch to Jake. "Marcus is my best hand," Jake told Emma as he showed them to their room. "Smart, hard-working, honest. Been teaching him everything I know about managing a ranch because, frankly, I am getting too old for this. If Robert ever decides to sell, I have been trying to convince Marcus to make an offer. Place like this would suit you too." Emma looked at Marcus and saw the longing in his eyes, quickly hidden. "That would cost a fortune," Marcus said practically, "more than I could ever afford." "Not if you had a partner," Jake said, "but that is a conversation for another day. For now, you two settle in." "Emma, the kitchen is through there and you are welcome to anything you need. The hands eat breakfast at dawn and supper at sunset, but you are not responsible for cooking for them. We have a cook for that." After Jake left, Emma and Marcus stood in their room, suddenly shy with each other. They were married now. This was real. This was forever. "Are you all right?" Marcus asked softly. Emma turned to him and smiled. "I am better than all right. I am happy." Marcus pulled her into his arms and kissed her, sweet and gentle at first, then deepening as Emma pressed closer. They had 2 days of marriage behind them already, but it still felt new and precious, this freedom to touch and hold and kiss whenever they wanted. "I still cannot believe you chose me," Marcus murmured against her hair. "I keep thinking I am going to wake up and discover it was all a dream." "If it is a dream, then we are both dreaming it," Emma said. "And I never want to wake up." Life on the ranch was everything Marcus had promised. Hard work, early mornings and late nights, but it was also beautiful in a way Emma had never experienced. The endless sky, the satisfaction of a job well done, the community of good people all working toward a common goal. Emma learned to ride properly, with Marcus as her patient teacher. She learned to cook for large groups, helping the ranch cook prepare meals for hungry cowboys. She learned about cattle and horses, about weather patterns and grass quality and all the 100 small details that went into running a successful ranch. And through it all, her love for Marcus grew deeper. She learned that he was an early riser who liked to watch the sunrise with a cup of coffee. That he had a gift with horses and could gentle even the most skittish animal. That he was patient and kind but also firm when the situation called for it. That he had a sense of humor that came out when he was relaxed, and that his laugh was one of the best sounds she had ever heard. 3 months after their wedding, Marcus came home with news. Robert Barrett had officially decided to sell the Double Bar Ranch. He was retiring to live with his daughter in St. Louis and wanted to see the ranch go to someone who would take care of it. The asking price was steep, but not impossible, especially if someone was willing to make a substantial down payment and pay the rest over time. "Jake wants us to buy it with him," Marcus told Emma that evening as they sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset. "He would put up half the money and handle more of the business side since he has the experience. I would manage the day-to-day operations and the hands. We would be equal partners." "What do you think?" Emma asked, though she could see the desire written all over his face. "I think it is an incredible opportunity," Marcus said. "But Emma, it would take every penny we have saved for our own place, and we would be in debt for years, paying off the loan. It is a huge risk." It is also a huge opportunity, Emma pointed out. Marcus, this ranch is already successful. You know it inside and out. Jake trusts you and wants to partner with you. And this land, it is beautiful. We could build our house here, raise our family here. Marcus turned to look at her. Our family, Emma smiled, placing a hand on her still flat stomach. I was going to wait to tell you, but I think now might be the right time. I think I am pregnant, Marcus. It is early still, but I am almost certain. The expression on Marcus's face made Emma's heart swell. Joy and wonder and love all mixed together. He reached out and placed his hand over hers, both of them touching the place where their child was growing. Are you sure? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. As sure as I can be. I have missed my courses twice now, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. I was going to ride into town to see the doctor next week to confirm, but Marcus, I know. We are going to have a baby. Marcus pulled her into his arms and held her close, his face buried in her hair. Emma felt him shaking slightly and realized he was crying, quiet tears of happiness. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for choosing me, for building this life with me, for giving me everything I did not even know I wanted. The question is, Emma said, pulling back to look at him, do we buy the ranch? Because if we are going to have a baby, we need to think about stability and security. This ranch is security, Marcus said firmly. It is a solid investment and a legacy we can pass on. Yes, Emma, let us do it. Let us buy the double bar and make it ours. The next morning, Marcus and Jake met with Robert Barrett and his lawyer. The negotiations took most of the day, but by sunset, the deal was done. Marcus Reed and Jake Henderson were now the proud owners of the Double Bar Ranch, equal partners in an enterprise that spanned thousands of acres and represented the culmination of Marcus's dreams. That night, lying in bed with Marcus, Emma felt a contentment she had never known was possible. Less than 4 months ago, she had been on a wagon train heading toward a life she had not chosen. Now, she was married to the man she loved, pregnant with their first child, and about to embark on an adventure that would define the rest of their lives. I love you, Marcus said, his hand resting on her stomach. Both of you. We love you too, Emma whispered. So very much. The months that followed were busy beyond anything Emma could have imagined. Marcus and Jake worked from before dawn until after dark, learning the full scope of the ranch's operations and making improvements where they could. Emma helped where she was able, though Marcus became increasingly protective as her pregnancy progressed. In December, Emma's father returned from California. He had gone all the way to Sacramento, stayed with Catherine for 2 months, and then decided that California was not for him after all. He wanted to be near his daughter and his future grandchild, he said. So he returned to Kansas and took a position with a law firm in Republic handling land contracts and property disputes. I should have listened when you told me about Kansas, Edward said when he visited the ranch for the first time. This is beautiful country. I can see why you wanted to stay. Emma showed him around the ranch with pride, pointing out the improvements they had already made and describing their plans for the future. Marcus had started building them a house on the highest point of the property, with views that stretched for miles in every direction. It was not finished yet, but the frame was up and the walls were going in. By spring, Marcus promised, they would be able to move in. In March of 1879, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Edward Marcus Reed, honoring both grandfathers. The birth was long and difficult, but when Marcus first held his son, tears streaming down his face, Emma knew every moment of pain had been worth it. He is perfect, Marcus said in wonder, looking at the tiny infant in his arms. Emma, we made a person, a whole person. We did, Emma agreed, exhausted but happy. And he is going to need a brother or sister eventually, so we will be making more. Marcus laughed. Let us get through the first one before we start planning more. But over the next 3 years, they did have more. A daughter they named Rose Catherine came along in 1881, with Emma's blonde hair and Marcus's brown eyes. And then twin boys, James and William, arrived in 1883, completing their family in dramatic fashion. The house Marcus built grew with them, adding rooms and space as needed. It was everything Emma had imagined and more, with a wide porch perfect for watching sunsets, a large kitchen where the whole family could gather, and bedrooms enough for everyone. The ranch prospered under Marcus and Jake's partnership, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Jake remained a vital part of their lives, becoming Uncle Jake to the children and a valued advisor to Marcus and Emma. He eventually married himself, a widow from town named Sarah who fit seamlessly into their extended ranch family. Emma's father was a constant presence in his grandchildren's lives, arriving at the ranch every weekend to spoil them shamelessly and tell them stories. He seemed younger somehow, the grief that had shadowed him for so many years finally lifting. He admitted to Emma one day that coming back to Kansas had saved him, given him purpose again. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Marcus and Emma rode out to the spot where he had pulled her from the Stampede. They did it every year, a tradition they had started on their 1st anniversary. They would stand there holding hands, remembering how everything had begun, marveling at how far they had come. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked, as he did every year. "Staying here instead of going to California, choosing this life?" "Never," Emma said firmly, as she always did. "Not for a single moment. Marcus, you gave me everything I did not know I wanted. A home, a family, a purpose. Love that fills me up until I think my heart might burst." "I was so scared that day," Marcus admitted. "Scared I would not reach you in time. Scared I would lose you before I ever had the chance to know you. And then when I pulled you onto Dusty and you held onto me like I was your whole world, I knew I would do anything to keep you safe, to keep you close. You told me once that I make you want to be better," Emma said. "But Marcus, you made me want to live again. After my mother died, I was just going through the motions, doing what was expected. You taught me what it means to choose my own path, to fight for what I want. You gave me back my joy." Marcus pulled her into his arms and kissed her, deep and sweet and full of the love that had only grown stronger over 5 years of marriage. Around them, the prairie grass waved in the wind, the same grass that had been there the day Emma nearly died and instead found her future. When they returned to the house, their children came running to meet them. Edward, now a sturdy 4-year-old, reached them first. Rose toddled after him, laughing. The twins were still babies, being carried by Edward Wellington, who had ridden out to watch them while Marcus and Emma took their annual ride. "Papa!" Edward shrieked, launching himself at Marcus, who caught him easily and swung him up onto his shoulders. "I helped Grandpa with the horses." "Did you now?" Marcus said, winking at Edward Wellington. "What a good helper you are." Rose demanded to be picked up too, so Emma scooped her up, settling the little girl on her hip. The twins began to fuss, wanting their parents, so Emma and Marcus traded, Marcus taking the babies while Emma held Rose and took Edward's hand. They walked back to the house together, this family they had built, and Emma felt that same certainty she had felt 5 years ago when Marcus pulled her from danger. This was right. This was home. This was exactly where she was meant to be. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The children grew strong and capable, learning to ride and rope and work the ranch alongside their father. Edward showed an aptitude for business that reminded Emma of her own father, often helping with the ranch accounts. Rose had her mother's practical nature and her father's way with horses. The twins were inseparable troublemakers who kept everyone on their toes. Marcus and Emma grew older together, their love deepening with time and experience. There were hard years when drought threatened the ranch, and difficult seasons when cattle prices dropped and money was tight. There were personal sorrows too, when Jake died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, leaving his share of the ranch to Marcus and Emma with the request that they take care of Sarah. But there were far more good times than bad. Weddings to celebrate as the children grew up and found loves of their own. Grandchildren to spoil and teach. Quiet evenings on the porch watching the sunset, Marcus's hand in Emma's, both of them content in the life they had built together. On their 25th wedding anniversary, when Emma was 45 and Marcus was 48, they once again rode out to the spot where their story had begun. Their children had planned a party for later that evening, but they wanted this time alone first, this quiet moment to remember. 25 years, Marcus marveled, his hair now streaked with gray, lines of laughter and hard work around his eyes. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together. I know what you mean, Emma said, her own face showing the passage of time but her eyes still bright with love. I cannot imagine my life without you in it, cannot remember what it felt like to not have you beside me. Do you remember what you said to me? Marcus asked. That first day when you were still shaking from the stampede and holding on to me like I was the only solid thing in the world. I said I was yours, Emma replied, and I meant it. I am still yours, Marcus Reed, now and always. And I am yours, Marcus said, pulling her close. For as long as I draw breath, Emma, you are my home, my heart, my everything. They stood there together as the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, they could see the ranch house Marcus had built, warm lights glowing in the windows where their family waited. Smoke rose from the chimney, carrying the scent of the feast being prepared. They could hear faint laughter on the wind, the sound of their children and grandchildren gathering to celebrate. We should head back, Emma said eventually, though neither of them moved. They will be waiting for us. One more minute, Marcus said. Let me hold you here for one more minute, in the place where everything began. So Emma stayed in his arms, her head resting on his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. The same heart that had raced with fear when he saw her in danger all those years ago. The same heart that had chosen her, claimed her, loved her without reservation or hesitation. Thank you, Emma whispered, for saving me that day, for seeing me, for loving me. No, Marcus said softly. Thank you for staying, for choosing this life with me, for making every single day an adventure worth waking up for. They rode back to the house together through the gathering darkness, their horses walking side by side. As they approached, the door flew open and children poured out, laughing and calling for them. Edward, now a young man of 24 with a wife and baby of his own. Rose at 22, engaged to a neighboring rancher's son. The twins at 20, wild and reckless and full of life. And half a dozen grandchildren ranging from infants to toddlers, all demanding attention. Marcus helped Emma down from her horse, and they were immediately surrounded by family. Edward Wellington was there too, now in his 70s but still spry, bouncing a great-grandson on his knee. Sarah Henderson had come with her grown children from her first marriage, bringing pies and blessings. The party lasted late into the night, full of food and music and stories. The children demanded to hear again how their parents had met, and Marcus and Emma took turns telling the tale, embellishing and laughing at the parts they disagreed on. Your father rode into danger without a thought for his own safety, Emma said, looking at Marcus with love. "He was the bravest thing I had ever seen." "Your mother held on to me and looked at me like I was a hero," Marcus countered, "when really I was just a cowboy who got lucky. Lucky that I saw her, lucky that I reached her in time, lucky that she chose to stay." "We were both lucky," Emma said firmly, taking his hand. "Lucky to have found each other, lucky to have built this life together, lucky to have all of you." As midnight approached and the party wound down, Emma found herself standing on the porch watching the stars. Marcus came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. It was a position they had stood in countless times over the years, comfortable and familiar and right. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked. "I am thinking about that girl on the wagon train," Emma said. 20 years old and heading toward a life she had not chosen. If someone had told her what was waiting for her in Kansas, she never would have believed it. All of this, Marcus. The ranch, the children, the grandchildren, us. It exceeds every dream I never knew I had. "I am thinking about a cocky young cowboy who thought he had his whole life planned out," Marcus said. "Work hard, save money, buy land. It was all so simple in my head. And then I saw a woman standing frozen in front of a stampede and everything changed." "You changed everything, Emma." "We changed everything," Emma corrected. "Together." The last of their guests departed, children were put to bed, and finally it was just Marcus and Emma alone in the house they had built. They climbed the stairs to their bedroom, helping each other undress with the ease of long practice. They slipped into bed together, Emma curling into Marcus's side with her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. "I love you," Marcus said into the darkness. "I've told you that almost every day for 25 years, but I do not think I will ever say it enough. I love you, Emma Reed." "I love you too," Emma whispered. "My cowboy, my hero, my home." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other the way they had fallen asleep for 25 years. Outside, the Kansas wind whispered through the prairie grass. The same wind that had once blown Emma's bonnet away and set in motion everything that followed. The same wind that now carried the sounds of cattle lowing in the distance, horses shifting in the barn, the peaceful sounds of a ranch at rest. The years ahead would bring more changes. More grandchildren would be born. The ranch would continue to grow and prosper. Marcus and Emma would celebrate 30 years, 40 years, 50 years together. Their children would build their own ranches, carry on the legacy that Marcus and Emma had started, but the foundation remained constant. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love over safety, adventure over certainty, partnership over solitude. A cowboy who had ridden into danger to save a woman's life and ended up saving his own. A woman who had declared herself his, and then spent the rest of her life proving it with every breath, every choice, every day. On their 50th wedding anniversary, when Emma was 70 and Marcus was 73, they rode out one last time to the place where it all began. Marcus's hands shook slightly on the reins now, and Emma had to use a mounting block to get on her horse, but they were determined. This was their tradition, their pilgrimage to the sacred ground where their story had started. They stood there together, holding hands as they had held hands 50 years before. The prairie looked the same, eternal and unchanging despite all the time that had passed. Marcus looked at Emma, seeing past the silver hair and the lines on her face to the frightened young woman he had pulled from danger so long ago. "I am still yours," Emma said, echoing the words she had spoken 5 decades earlier. "Now and always, Marcus, I am still yours." "And I am still the luckiest man alive," Marcus replied, "because you chose me. Out of all the lives you could have lived, all the paths you could have taken, you chose this one. You chose us." Best decision I ever made, Emma said firmly. Even knowing all the hard times, all the challenges we have faced, I would choose you again. Every single time, I would choose you. They kissed there in the fading light, two old people who loved each other as fiercely at 70 and 73 as they had at 20 and 23. Then they rode back to the ranch house, where 3 generations of family waited to celebrate with them. Marcus lived to be 78, dying peacefully in his sleep with Emma beside him, holding his hand. His last words were, "I love you," and Emma's last words to him were, "I am yours." Emma lived 5 more years after Marcus passed, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She spent her final years telling stories about the ranch, about the early days, about the life she and Marcus had built together. She made sure everyone knew how it had started, with a stampede and a rescue and a certainty that defied logic. On her deathbed, at the age of 83, surrounded by more family than could fit comfortably in the room, Emma's final words were about Marcus. "I see him," she whispered. "He is here, waiting for me, my cowboy, my love. I am coming home." The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations as Marcus and Emma had hoped. Their great-grandchildren still told the story of how it all began, of the woman who nearly died in a stampede and the cowboy who saved her life. They told it at weddings and birthdays, to new babies and visiting friends, keeping the legend alive. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blows just right across the Kansas prairie, people swear they can see 2 figures standing together on the spot where the stampede happened so long ago. A cowboy and his wife, hands joined, looking at each other with love that transcends death. Reminding everyone who sees them that true love, the kind that is built on courage and choice and commitment, lasts forever. The Double Bar Ranch still stands, prosperous and proud, a testament to everything Marcus and Emma built together. Their house on the hill still shelters their descendants, and the land still provides. The cattle still graze on prairie grass, and horses still run free in the corrals Marcus built with his own hands. But more than the physical legacy, Marcus and Emma left behind something more precious. They left proof that love at first sight can last a lifetime, that choosing someone and being chosen in return is the greatest adventure there is, that a single moment of courage can change everything, can create a legacy that echoes through generations. Emma Wellington had climbed onto a wagon in Philadelphia heading toward a life she had not chosen. She had nearly died in a Kansas stampede on a hot day in July. And she had been saved by a cowboy named Marcus Reed, who gave her not just her life back, but a life worth living. A life filled with love and purpose and joy, with challenges met together and dreams achieved through partnership. She had told him that first day that she was his. And she was, for 83 years of life and forever after. And he was hers, equally and completely, from the moment he pulled her onto his horse until long after their bodies returned to the Kansas soil they had loved so well. It was a love story for the ages, born in danger and forged in commitment. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the choices we make in moments of crisis, from the courage to grab onto hope when it appears, from the willingness to say, "I am yours," and mean it with every fiber of your being. The wagon train Emma had been traveling with made it to California without her. Her Aunt Catherine understood completely when Edward's letter arrived explaining why his daughter had stayed in Kansas. She wrote back with her blessing and a gift of money to help the young couple start their life together. Years later, Catherine came to visit and spent a month at the ranch, declaring it the most romantic place she had ever seen. The members of that wagon train told Emma's story too, spreading it across the West. The tale of the woman who nearly died in a stampede was saved by a cowboy and chose love over her original plans. It became one of those stories that people told around campfires and in boarding houses, a tale that gave hope to others facing uncertain futures. Margaret Flynn, Emma's friend from the wagon train, corresponded with her for 50 years. She made it to California, married a merchant in San Francisco, and raised 4 children. But she always said that Emma's story was the most romantic thing she had ever witnessed, and she never tired of telling people about the friend who had found true love in the most unexpected way. The prairie where Marcus saved Emma eventually became part of the national grasslands, protected forever. A historical marker stands near the spot now, telling the story of the Double Bar Ranch and the couple who built it. Tourists stop there sometimes, reading about Marcus and Emma Reed, and they smile at the romance of it all. But the truth of their story was not in the dramatic rescue or the quick courtship. It was in the 53 years that followed, in the daily choice to love each other, in the work they did side by side to build something lasting. It was in the laughter and the tears, the successes and the failures, the ordinary moments that made up a life. Marcus and Emma's story proved that love is not just a feeling or a moment. Love is a decision made over and over again, day after day, year after year. It is choosing your person when things are hard just as readily as when they are easy. It is building something together that neither of you could have built alone. And it all started with a stampede, a rescue, and a young woman who looked at the cowboy who saved her life and said, "I am yours now." 3 simple words that changed everything, that set in motion a love story that would echo through generations, inspiring countless others to believe in the power of choosing love, of taking risks, of grabbing hold of happiness when it appears and never letting go. That is the true legacy of Marcus and Emma Reed. Not just the ranch they built or the family they raised, but the example they set. The proof that true love exists, that it can be found in the most unexpected places, and that it can last a lifetime and beyond if you are brave enough to reach for it and wise enough to nurture it every single day. Their story ends where all great love stories end, not with death but with the eternal truth that love transcends everything. Marcus and Emma Reed loved each other with a passion that started in a moment of danger and deepened with every year that passed. They built a life together that mattered, that had meaning, that left the world better than they found it. And somewhere on the Kansas prairie, where the grass still waves in the wind and the sky stretches endlessly overhead, their love continues. Not as ghosts or spirits, but as an essential part of the land itself, woven into the very fabric of the place they called home. Anyone who stands there can feel it, that certainty and rightness, that sense of 2 souls perfectly matched finding each other against impossible odds. The story of the cowboy who rescued a woman from a stampede, and the woman who declared herself his and then proved it every day for the rest of her life, lives on. It lives on in their descendants who still work the land they loved. It lives on in the house Marcus built that still stands strong. It lives on in the hearts of everyone who hears their tale and believes, even for a moment, that love like that is possible, because it is possible. Marcus and Emma Reed proved it. And their legacy is the hope they give to others, the inspiration to be brave enough to grab onto love when it appears, to be bold enough to declare yourself to another person, to be strong enough to build something lasting together. That is how their story ends, and that is how all the best love stories end. Not with an ending at all, but with a beginning that never stops beginning, with love that never stops growing, with a choice made once that reverberates forever, echoing through time and space, reminding everyone who hears it that love is worth the risk, worth the work, worth everything. Always and forever worth everything.